Section 5, the longest section, and for that reason you must be prepared to answer questions on the production side of things. So know all your key terms, your job, your batch, your flow, things to do with quality, so quality assurance, total quality management, how total quality management costs more to invest in. It's a long-term strategy that means that every single element of the whole business process has an eye on quality, and it's totally different from the traditional quality control where you used to just check at the end of the process. If that was the case, that quality control element, then you had a lot of waste, because if a product is bad you just basically had to throw it away. Whereas with TQM, if there's a problem maybe 25% down the production line, you could solve it then and there, and you wouldn't therefore have waste, and therefore your costs are not increased. It costs a lot to bring in TQM through training, maybe take a couple of years to become fully TQM, but it's something that's important. So be well aware of all the production elements, and not just the production itself, but where you produce. I can't see how there won't be a question on whether they should produce in China or in the UK. It seems really obvious, since though Section 5 is a page and a half. So first up, if we look at the fact that the T-shirt is seen as a collector's item. Well, if it's a collector's item, you can certainly bring in price and you can talk about premium pricing. If it's a collector's item, then it's desirable and therefore can be worth more. It's this whole positive image, so it's linked to ethics again, so business ethics, being green, being sustainable, and people want to be connected with those ideas because that, you know, they're quite nice things to say that you support. So moving on to the next one, there's a bit of information in a minute about where and when they sell them and the prices. If we look at China as the next one, so there's a few issues that are thrown up here. The exchange rate, again, spiced, strong pound, imports cheap, export dear, and that'll be the pound versus the yen. I think it looks like that. We'll do a little bit of work in class on that, but if you're going to import T-shirts from China, then you want a strong pound because imports are cheap. So if you can take them from China, you want a strong pound. If you're not going to, then it doesn't really concern you. You're not exporting to China, so this bit doesn't matter for them. You're just importing the T-shirts. The next bit that we look at is flow. Oh, sorry, there's a few other things here. So you've got taxes and tariffs, potentially to get T-shirts into the country because you're importing, and that might bring in extra costs. So you would need to be aware of those extra costs as you're bringing goods into the country. Now those might change because of Brexit and trade deals that the government set up, and if you're to bring in a little bit of that, it's not in the text, but a little bit of that, just a little, might just show that you're aware of the business environment, the current business environment. So flow production, we know flow production, that is the traditional sort of mass produced high volume, high output, identical products, so there's no variation. There's no variation, so customers get the same, but it massively drives down the unit cost, because as the production line's going past, it's just going past with very little alteration, so you can produce a huge number of items and therefore the unit cost comes down, and that's why the Chinese T-shirts are cheaper. The unit cost is cheaper because they can make more, but there's also the element of the fact that in China you've got low wages, you've probably got you have got sort of poor health and safety. Basically the treatment of employees allows you to drop the price. So there's a couple of things there. So that can be compared to, and this would be a classic question of whether they should use flow or batch. They use an element of flow just to create the white t-shirts, and then they use batch production to bring in a little bit of a unique element to each t-shirt. So that might be the colour, it might be a slight design change, but each t-shirt, they'll do a batch of blue, a batch of red, and that increases the unit cost a bit, because every time you change to do a different batch, you'd have to reset machinery. It's a little less boring for the employees, so they're a little bit more engaged because they're having to vary their job, whereas flow production is very monotonous. It's not very motivating for employees, and you might get sort of high absentee levels at work. So this batch production, it means then though that you can charge a little bit more, so the price can go up because of that variation. But as I say, the unit cost would go up as well to produce different t-shirts each time. Most companies now have moved well away from flow production, because as consumers we want more than just a generic product. We want something that's more personal to us. So the batch and the flow production has had to be brought in. You wouldn't use cars as examples in this exam, but just think about, you used to get a car and it was just black, and that was what you got. Now you can get different colours, different stereos, different wheels, different paint jobs, different engine size, different, all sorts of variations, and that's so that they can sell us either the basic model or the premium model, which comes in at a hell of a price. You could talk about China. Make sure you're aware of globalisation. What globalisation is, sort of bringing the world in trade terms closer together. So the world is still physically the same size, but we're very much connected now in terms of trade, communication and transport. So there could be something around globalisation and how Boat and Mountain Festival are benefiting in a cost sense due to globalisation. That's the positives, usually to do with cost. However, there's negatives which we will come on to in a second. There is definitely an angle to talk about economies of scale here. So the more t-shirts you make, the cheaper it becomes. So when you manufacture in bulk, the unit cost, the price per t-shirt comes down. So if you order more, you'll then get them cheaper. If your sale price stays the same, for example, if you sell at 10 and 10, clearly if you've ordered more, you're making a better margin, 8 quid, 6 quid and 5 quid, when you've ordered a lot more t-shirts. So the economies of scale there is the bulk buying economies of scale. But do remember that there's other economies of scale that you might want to bring in, maybe not on this question, managerial economies of scale, which to do with the bigger the business, they can recruit the better staff. Technical economies of scale, the bigger the business, they have better software, better machinery. Financial economies of scale, the bigger the business, the easier it is to get hold of a lot of finance, shares potentially, bigger loans, better trade credit deals, better leasing, better hire purchase deals. So that's the economies of scale, buying in bulk, but you have to have the diseconomies of scale as well. The bigger the company is, the bigger the order are, sometimes it can equal quality issues. And that's something that's been levelled against Chinese manufacturers. They might make it cheap, but is the quality as good? Something then that is really sort of very obvious in this case study is the ethics, once again. And that's to do with health and safety, treatment of employees, safety practices and non-renewables. So there's a clear angle here that in China there are ethics issues, what you would class as corporate, social responsibility. So the firm that they're using, the supplier they're using, is not showing good CSR, corporate social responsibility. and that has a knock-on impact on the festival's image, because they're trying to, and again link that to the grant, would they get the grant if they're using a firm that treats its employees badly, has poor health and safety and is non-renewable? I would question. I think the £30,000 grant would be withdrawn if they are connected to this. Now, they say that this is all untrue, right? However, has the damage already been done? Even if it's not true, has the damage already been done? If the articles are already out there and the newspapers and the TV stations are talking about it, then it's potentially that they have to shift anyway, because the media have already picked up on that particular story. So then we look at, I would say let's look at some diseconomies. So we've talked a little bit about them, but I would bring in again the fact that quality is an issue. Can they use just-in-time delivery systems to make sure they're efficient? So you need to be using words like efficiency, productivity. These are the disadvantages of operating on a large scale. So most big businesses really benefit because they can effectively be a bit bully tactics, but actually there are some problems that arise from being a large producer, and that is mainly to do with quality. So you could talk then about quality control, like I said earlier, quality assurance, and TQM. Now you would have to do a factory visit. Are they using those particular strategies? So then we've looked. We could look here down the bottom at trade credit, or a bank loan, or an overdraft. So this again looks like we're going to get a question on sources of finance. So just be aware of which ones are short term, which are medium term, and which are long term, which are internal, and which are external. Think about the interest payment and what it's actually been used for. So previously they've used an overdraft to cover, and that allows you to go into spend more than you have. Trade credit is a good one. If they've been working with a supplier for a long time, they might say you can have the materials now and pay later. Now you pay later when you've sold the t-shirts. So you've got revenue in to cover costs. So, and be aware of the bank loan, which one has a higher percentage interest, because that's something that you would definitely want to talk about. I'm going to just put in a couple of questions now, even though we're sort of not at the end of section 5. I'd like you to be able to discuss whether Bolton Mountain Festival should change its supplier or not. So basically, should it go from Chinese to UK? Now clearly the costs have risen, but is that a price worth paying? Only a quid more to get a cleaner reputation, because the UK supplier wouldn't have these